All right, and we're back again with the Pop Culture Cosmos. Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here. Well, when we're talking about the great things of the decade, but also as well when we're talking The Expanse, I had to get him back on here. He is a good friend of the show indeed. You got to check out what he's doing today. Well, whenever you can, if you can, because he is just going all over when it concerns all the great things that are going on with what he's doing with his in life with music, with all the things he's doing with drones, with NASCAR, with hunting. You know what? Even with when it concerns space, it is my good friend, Mr. Marcus de la Garza. And Marcus, I cannot thank you enough for being here in the middle of the month when we're talking about great things of the decade. But before we do, I know there's a lot of stuff you want to talk about when it comes to The Expanse.
Well, thank you for having me back, Gerald, and thank you for the pop culture cosmos family for having me back. But yes, The Expanse is very it's heavy on my mind right now. Not heavy, it's just at the forefront of my mind, and I think a lot of it digs into the trip I just had this weekend. I was at Kennedy Space Center over in Cape Canaveral, Cocoa Beach area, and it was just a really inspiring experience, and it really spoke to me as far as why I think space travel and TV shows about space travel, movies about space travel really intrigue me. And we'll get there. But I think we really need to start with The Expanse, and we'll find a way to tie that back into cultural relevance at the end. So
That sounds good, my friend. First thing I got to hit up with you, and we talked about this before last time we spoke to the Advance, and that is this. It is moving, or it has moved, or it is gone to Amazon from Sci-Fi Channel. And the first thing that comes to mind, in my research in regarding to this season Expanse is some of the outward claims of things going on within the world of the Expanse that are not going to be as much because Amazon doesn't seem to be spending as much on the Expanse. Oh, Marcus, you there? Think I lost you. All right, Marcus, you there? Think I lost you. He'll be back in just a moment. Hopefully he'll be here in just a moment.
Oh, there you are. Microphone.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, I'm back. I'm back. Sorry.
Sorry about that, man. We've been out of town all weekend, and I've got Spectrum coming to replace my cable line.
Uh oh. Hello. Hello.
I just going on with my Wi-Fi right now.
Oh, no worries. I can.
Um,
I see you pop back up.
okay, all right. All right, man. Hopefully that's the end of it.
No problem, my friend. Believe me,
Yeah, but
as one who has suffered, I understand. Believe me.
yeah, well, all right. So I don't know if I told you, Jamie and I moved into a new place, and so
Mhm.
when we did, we're renting a new place, and it's HOA is just kind of crazy. And so what it came down to is the line that comes in from the house that actually goes from the intake into the drop at the top of the house is bad and it needs to be replaced. And they've dragged their feet on it for 3 months now. So
Ah,
now I'm battling it tomorrow. But normally when I reset things, things are great for 20 hours, and then I have to go fight with it again at hour 21.
no worries, my friend. I'm just
Okay.
glad to have you back on now. And this will cut seamlessly. So don't worry in post. So I
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to
no,
hear. I
I
want to
know.
hear your I want to hear your
Yeah,
thoughts, man. What I was asking before you zipped on out was the expanses change to Amazon. I know some of the actors have already kind of dropped hints about how the production value is not quite there from sci-fi, which to me is kind of surprising, to be honest with you,
yep.
and not surprising because I know the boys. One of the criticisms was the boys. All the production values were put up in the front part of the season because they were unsure where how far the season would go and what people were going to be really into it. Turns out it was a great series. And the same thing might be headed here with when it comes to the Expanse, with Amazon maybe not putting enough financial input into it as much as they should. What are your thoughts on that? Because I'd love to hear your thoughts as far as, is it something that they do need to go ahead and pay more love to with money?
I mean, absolutely. I think if you're going to buy a series like this, you've got to put the money into it. But that being said, I mean, from what I've heard, all the early screeners have only seen the first six. Starts. Hey, part of me starts to wonder, whether or not we've got an issue of Amazon not wanting to let the cat out of the bag. Whether it's do we want to make sure that the reviewers are getting enough information here, but not enough to where they're letting the secrets out, which that plays a different marketing strategy, and I don't know if I agree with that, and I think that could hurt them in the long run here. You might scare away viewers before they even get a chance to come in and watch and take part and enjoy the season. But that being said, I think moving to Amazon and going to a new production studio, they have a chance. And there's a few interviews I've read with Dominique Tipper, the woman who plays Naomi, and Stephen Strait, the guy who plays Holden, where they talk about how with Amazon they now have the chance to slow the storylines down and give you a little bit more than what you had previously with Sci-Fi Network, where we've kind of jumped through major plot lines to kind of get us to a point where we can kind of bring everything together. And so I'm really looking forward to this season slowing things down. And the statement about the production value, I think, warrants a little criticism to a certain extent, in the sense that we're doing something very new this season. We've always been about social classes and divisions between people, right? It's always been Earthers versus Belters, Belters versus Mars, the outer planets versus the inner planets. It's always been that. Whereas this season, it's not going to be as much of that. It's going to be, these are the new challenges we have on this beautiful
Marcus, you back? Trying to get you back in now. And I lost you. Hi, are you there? Are you there? Whenever you're ready to go, man, my friend, no problem. There you go. I got you back.
My apologies, man. This is really embarrassing.
Oh, no worries, my friend. It's happened to me. It's happened to so many others. Don't worry about it.
Before we resume, give me just a minute. I want to make sure we don't get interrupted again, so I'm plugging my phone in.
No worries. Whenever you're ready.
All right. So let's see, what was I saying? We're divided based on class, and we are facing new enemies. Okay, give me a second. You still there? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Whenever you're ready to go.
All right. We're facing new enemies on Nuterra, Illis, whatever we choose to call it in the show. In the books, you know, the people that inhabit the planet before Royal Charter Energy, who is our a little bit of our antagonist this season, shows up. The people that inhabit the planet before this big corporation show up, call it one thing. The corporation calls it a different thing. They've got a charter from the UN. It becomes a major mess, and it's a huge plot point for the show for the season moving forward. And so we've hit this point now where I just we've kind of progressed as a show in the sense that we're no longer battling each other. We're battling the new adventures of the new planets that are in front of us. You know, when season 3 ended, the ring gates opened, and we had 1,000 new worlds that we could enter and explore and find our wonderful planet or our perfect planet, or maybe whatever killed the creators that created the proto molecule that was sent out to create the super highway through the galaxy. And so we've got some new challenges this season, but we have a lot of the same returning characters. We see Thomas Jane come back as the this season. He'll be the investigator. He's still going to be Miller, but as we know from previous seasons, Miller's not actually Miller anymore. He's actually just a projection in Holden's mind. So we've hit this point now where we're going to see some of the familiar faces, but we're also going to see some Um, what's his name? Adolphus Mertry. He is going to be one of the predominant figures in this season. He's going to play a security officer, and actually the chief security officer for Royal Charter Energy, who's there on New Terra / Illis, and he's going to try and take control of the situation from Holden, and it's not gonna go well. I mean, we're gonna see a lot of violence. It's gonna be violence like we've had in years past, just less space drama. And I think that may be where the thread comes in of the criticism that maybe Amazon hasn't invested enough into the CGI or just the production value. I think they were able to take a step back this season and maybe put more into the storyline and less on the actual visual effects. And I'm not excusing from that for that. I don't think that's a great strategy. That's how you lose fans, I think, at the end of the day.
Once again, it's my good friend Marcus de la Garza. If you have any questions for him at all on The Expanse, NASCAR, and so much more, you can always give us a heads up at Pop Culture Cosmo on Twitter, or also as well popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. But you're excited nonetheless about the series moving over to Amazon. You think it's going to be a better chance to go ahead and, for this, either the series or the specific episodes, to branch them out further, to maybe pad the runtime in a positive way. That way you could get more fleshing out of the whole Expanse universe per se.
Yeah, and that's to me that's the important thing here is I want to make sure that this universe gets a chance to fully run, in the sense that I want these storylines to play out. And I'm biased though, and I realize that. Gerald, how do you feel about this? I mean, where do you sit in this chain here?
Well, I personally don't mind it in this case, is because I'm going to relate it to The Mandalorian, because The Mandalorian is the latest series from Disney Plus to get such wide attention. And I think that it's a series that would benefit, or at least I thought initially would benefit, by being on a streaming service, because you could flesh it out over the course of a period of time and build that underbelly of the Star Wars universe that so many people wanted to know more about. They really haven't done that as much as I liked, because the episodes are 40 minutes long. I was very surprised that they didn't go an hour long, and I think that's probably the biggest thing I take away from it as far as a detriment to it. Overall, it's still pretty positive, but the biggest detriment, I think, is if they went ahead and they fleshed it out over an entire hour. I think the series itself would be far better served. This is where a series like The Expanse can take what it was limited to in a commercially driven type of runtime and take it even further. Now that it's on a streaming platform, you could extend and expand the episodes to build the universe even more, build the plot lines even better, without having a drag, without having any pacing issues. You can make those hardcore fans and those fans interested in the product like yourself, and also the fans that are getting into it for the first time on an Amazon Prime platform, even more knowledgeable about the Expanse universe and what you want to get out of it by extending the runtime even more. And you now have that option and availability to do so on a streaming format.
I get your point, and that's, I think that's the hope that we all have, right? That when the Expanse and literally any show hits a streaming platform, we hit this point where we have this hope of, yes, they have no bounds anymore, and in the later seasons of Game of Thrones, we saw this where they'd bounce between hour-long episodes, hour-and-a-half-long episodes. They would do 45-minute episodes sometimes. And so you want to see the full utilization of the streaming platform. And I don't want to be constrained by the conventional time values of TV, broadcast television. And so, yes, I do agree with you there, where it feels like we're not fully utilizing the platform yet, but at the same time, we've got 5 days now until we actually get the full release of the season, and who knows? I mean, like I was saying earlier, I think the reviewers have only seen the first 6 episodes at this point, and I think that's going to be a huge distinction at the end of the day. Um, I mean, I guess if rumors are to believe to be true, the Expanse Discord is very active, and a lot of people are talking about the fact that um, there's a little more character development than we've had in the past, or at least that's what's been speculated. And so I'm very excited to see some of that character development when it comes to Naomi, maybe even Alex, or I would love to see Amos developed as a character in the show, but I'm not sure if he's worth the investment yet for the audience.
And that's something I also wanted to ask you as far as where you would like to see the series grow is obviously because it's such a character driven series, and it has to be because of the limitations that it had in the format that it was on. And well, that's what I want to ask you, but you still want to see the series grow and expand, and as far as the characters are concerned, because that's where the Expanse really shines. So I ask you, my friend, which characters do you really want to see grow and expand? Or, if especially for someone that is jumping now onto the Expanse bandwagon, now that's going to be available on Amazon and it's going to be right there advertised in front of their face. If they have the Amazon Fire Stick, and that's the first thing that pops up is the advertisement for the Expanse and whatnot. So I want to ask you, what characters would you go with as far as just being at the forefront and expanding more about their role, expanding more of their roles, if you go ahead and make the Expanse so much more attractive to not only your audience, the hardcores and whatnot that are migrating over from sci-fi to Amazon, but also as well those interested in actually watching the product for the first time?
Yeah, and honestly, I have two people in mind right away, and it's Naomi Nagata and Avasarala. Both of them such strong characters in the book series that they've both been developed strong characters in the TV series, but I think there's a lot more to get out of them. Naomi's a genius in the books, and that's something that I don't think we've really accurately reflected in the books or in the TV show. Is that she's self-taught. She's literally a rocket scientist, and she understands, how the inner workings of the ship work. And I mean, I think we kind of downplay that just watching it, but I mean, this is still a rocket ship flying through space in a hard vacuum where conditions are harsh, and that's where it really ties in for me with my experience I had this weekend at Kennedy Space Center. And for those that are listening, I got to spend yesterday at Kennedy Space Center, Saturday, December the 7th, and kind of go through and experience the Apollo program and their exhibits. And one of the things that really resonated with me was the importance we put on some of these men post-mortem, I guess. We all build up these astronauts to be gods in our minds, I think, and they are to some extent, right? They are the best that maybe our nation has to offer at that given time in their fields, whether it's in courage or an actual understanding of the rocket science or whatever they're doing. But I think kind of that they're just men at the end of the day, but they're very intelligent men. They're exquisite men, and men and women. We've had very successful citizens and even non-citizens come through our astronaut training program that have done a lot to advance science throughout the world. And so if I could tie anything in, it would be that, I'd like to see the development of Naomi, because in the book, she's a very central character. She's very, she's a genius. She knows how to figure anything out. And so I don't think we've seen that throughout the books as much as I think I don't think we've seen it throughout TV show as much as we saw through the books. And the same thing with Avasarala. We've seen her be she's been a bad lady. There's another word I guess I was looking for there, but she's been a stern figure, and she's been a very direct figure in the sense that she gets done what she wants to get done, and I really appreciate that out of her. But she's growing into a new position here. She's taking over a larger role in the UN as we start the season, and she's making a lot more judgment calls that are going to impact the solar system and in its entirety. So if I could see the development of both of those characters, I think both of them are very relatable to the audience in the sense that they've got a lot of universal traits, in the sense, or not in the sense, but Naomi's very intelligent. She's very loving, very caring. She's always looking out for everybody else. And Avasarala might be the best political genius I've ever seen represented in a TV show. She's always thinking 6 steps ahead, and even when she's not and she's caught off guard in the book series, she always finds a way out. And those are two of the characters I think that are going to really blossom this season. Hopefully.
Hopefully, and hopefully that will be the case. But overall, you're excited for the move from Sci-Fi to Amazon, and overall, in the long run, you think it's going to be something that's very beneficial for the series. You think Amazon will have enough of an interest in the series to retain it long term, because we've seen this before where a show comes from a standard platform, goes to a streaming platform. We think on the surface that streaming platform is going to have enough faith into it, but after maybe a mild or a small run of a season or two, it seems to fall flat and get canceled thereafter. So that's something I'm worried about when it comes to The Expanse. But you see something different with Amazon going forward?
I can tell you my concerns there as well, and that's we've already been renewed for season 5, and that's what scares me is we jumped on the renewal early. I would hate to watch them not have a successful first season and then us flame out as a result of it. And then the season 5, the second season on Amazon doesn't go as well, and it just trickles off into the darkness. That is a very big concern for me. If that happens, I'd have to say that we've had a great run. We had a good run on Sci-Fi. It could have been better. You always want the storylines or the actual writing of the CGI or the actual visual production of the show to be better. But I think we got something that we could be proud of. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what Amazon can do with this. That being said, I'm hopeful for this, but I'm a little pessimistic at times, and or not pessimistic, but I'm a little cynical at times, and I see that this could also be a big failure at the same time. Not to be too clear, but to answer your question, yeah, I think this is a potential for us to grow. However, that being said, like all those things you want to throw in there, I think this could also be the downfall. But at the end of the day, we still have the book series. I'm very tied into that, and I'm on my second reread of the book series now, and there's nothing that I've ever read that kind of compares to it, and just the way it captivates my imagination. And I know that's not the same for everyone, but it really drives me to want to be better. So.
Fair enough. I'm just kind of worried as well that might be the case with The Expanse. Because these streaming networks, they sometimes they treat these shows almost like new toys. Okay, we're going to have this little toy. It wasn't exactly fitting right with this other individual, in this case, maybe another broadcast network or what have you. And we're just going to play with it for a little while before we discard it. And I've seen this before already. And I'm hoping that will not be the case with The Expanse, because I think it deserves a nice long run. I think it deserves a fleshing out of the universe before you go ahead and make a determination one way or another, whether or not you want to go ahead and continue it long term. But I believe it does deserve a chance to go ahead and be expanded upon, not only for the interim and the short term, but also the long term as well.
Well, to echo your sentiment there, Gerald, when they brought Kevin Smith in for that special trailer that they just did, where they wrapped up seasons 1, 2, and 3, or did a review of seasons 1, 2, and 3, it kind of gimmicky in the sense that Amazon had the new toy. Let's go find the not the industry model, but the industry standard for somebody that's a credible source, I guess, to come out and talk about something that's very involved in technology and just very nerdy at the end of the day. And so I was a little let down at first, but he did a wonderful job, and there's nothing to be let down about, after I watched it. But there was an initial glimpse of just like, oh no, is Amazon going to try and overproduce this to a sense of, we're going to make this too kitschy to something, and just kind of, we've got this new toy, we're going to show it off, but we're actually not really going to do anything with it. We're just going to bring some big names in to try and market it at you.
Well, I'm hopeful for the best when it comes to The Expanse. I see good things down the road for it personally, and I think it will go ahead and connect with audiences. You always wonder with a platform like Amazon Prime, even though it has the chance and opportunity to go ahead and be one of those few streaming networks to actually not only compete or could, in theory, beat Netflix, just with this, the sheer way of how Amazon Prime is structured. Although when the end result is with Amazon Prime, they don't get nearly as many views for their shows as Netflix. So determining a success and failure for each show when it concerns Amazon Prime is kind of different than how you can relate it to just how we see, for instance, all the millions of viewers that have already seen The Irishman, for example, on Netflix. So it's kind of different how we got to go ahead and weigh it when it comes to Expanse. But I have a feeling when it comes out very, very soon here in the next few days, that people are going to be really excited for it. I think Amazon will get behind it initially, especially because of the fact they don't have a whole lot of shows right now. I mean, they just got their fall shows. Some of their fall shows they've already sent out. Jack Ryan and some of the other shows that have come out, they've already gone ahead and started pushing
Marvelous
that.
Mrs. Maisel.
Yeah, exactly. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, that the Emmy Award winning show that it is. That's the one they're really promoting right now. Jack Ryan was last month, and after that, they have this gap of coming to the new shows of the second season of The Boys and whatnot. So this is a good time for The Expanse to come in, fill that gap, and be that show on Amazon Prime everybody needs to check out.
This might not make any sense, but it kind of feels like a soft rollout right here. They rolled Mrs. Maisel out. As soon as people finish that, whether they binge it in a day or they binge it over 7, they're going to be looking for something new, and they're going to be going back to Amazon. And it feels like we're rolling out The Expanse at the perfect time for those people to be finishing up Mrs. Maisel and look for something new. So I'm hoping, the scheduling that they've got, that they had for this fall or actually for this month in particular, having Maisel come first. Hopefully that leads to a boost in initial initial watches for season 4 of The Expanse. Here's something that we talked about last time I was on the show, Gerald, and you might have an answer for me. How often do the streaming numbers now come out for Amazon and Netflix and all the streaming platforms, or do we not know that information yet?
Well, actually, Nielsen is now playing a major active role in the pursuit of whatever ratings there are for these streaming platforms. So they will be coming out on a more consistent basis. I still don't see it coming out like, let's say, the traditional broadcast or cable networks where you get, even the next day you start to get ratings numbers and whatnot. I don't think you get it that quickly yet. Yeah, I don't think you get it that quickly yet, but you do see it. Like, for instance, in about the past 3 or 4 days after this, just before this recording, we got the numbers for The Irishman. So, and The Irishman The Irishman debuted on Netflix just before the Thanksgiving holiday. So that should give you relative idea. I think within the first maybe 10 days, the numbers should start releasing for what the first, episodes of The Expanse, how well it does. And the more important thing is, when it comes to Amazon's Expanse, it's not if people are watching the first episode. Not even if people are watching the first and second episodes, is how many people are actually continuing through the entire season. That is the most important number Amazon wants to see. So if you really want to support Amazon, you really want to support The Expanse, that is what you have to go ahead and do. So you have to follow it all the way through the end, or at least a great portion of it in order for it to feel like a success, because it's similar to what you would see on any type of show. Okay, the first episode does great, but then it starts losing viewership little by little by little by little by little. And of course, there's going to be even a little bit amount of drop when you concerns the whole type of season, because not everybody wants to go ahead and binge, series and whatnot. Sometimes they'd like to just get a little bit of taste. But the more people that go through the season of The Expanse, the more interest Amazon will have in retaining it.
Absolutely, and that's one of those things that, if we want to see a great season 5, we need to make sure we all put in the effort and watch season 4, I guess.
Exactly. Well, my friend, I know there's a couple more things we want to definitely talk about before we head on out, because we are talking a lot of great things when it comes to this decade in pop culture. And you're our NASCAR man in the know. And after another win by Kyle Busch this season, his second. And I when I say that, it seems kind of surprising to see, because I've always seen him dominate, at or near the top of the standings each and every year of this decade. So he's definitely one of the top drivers of this decade, in my opinion. But is he the top? I'll leave that to you to decide, my friend. So I want to hear your thoughts on the top 10 NASCAR drivers of this decade?
So I would say number one for me has got to be Jimmy Johnson. I know that he started his win campaign in 2006, and he won 5 straight between 2006 and 2010, and that was impressive. But then he rebounded and won another one in 2013 and another one in 2016, both with totally different body styles of those cars. It really showed how great of a driver he was, right? And to me, his dominance, I know it wasn't as great over the last 3 years, and even no, literally the last 3 years because he won in 2016. I know his dominance hasn't been there in the last 3 years, but I think if you take just his entire portfolio of wins, I would still give him the edge for 2010. That being said, I think Kyle Busch is going to take over for the 2020s. And I know we've already seen him win 2. I think he's got the possibility to win 2 more in the next 5 years. And I don't feel bad saying that. I don't regret saying that at all. And if it doesn't come to fruition, that's it's not going to hurt my feelings. But I do think this man is one of the most talented drivers we've seen in a very long time. Has no quit, shows up to the track every weekend, and is ready to go. We saw, and I say we, but really the Reddit NASCAR community started making comments throughout the playoffs about how Kyle Busch looked a little distracted, and it came out after the season that him and Samantha Busch were going through some in vitro fertilization stuff, and that might have been a distraction. That being said, the man still showed up every week and was a contender every week for the win. And I mean, there's not a lot of professionals you see out there that can put all of their family stuff aside, show up, and still win a race. That's or you win a football game or win a baseball game, win a hockey game, whatever it is. We do see people show up and have those monumental occasions when a loved one passes away or what have you. But this man was facing some sort of adversity at home and still showed up every week and delivered a high caliber performance. I would say Tony Stewart's the next one on my list. And I know that he was a little bit more prevalent, in the 2000s as well. He had that 2002, the 2005, but he also won in 2011. And he made a good run at his retirement year as well, whatever that was, 2015 or 2014. And as a driver, I really respect him. I think he was a great driver, and he's a great boss. I think he does a great job at Stewart-Haas Racing. I'm sideways with Stewart-Haas right now because they let go of my driver Daniel Suarez, but that's something that was a business decision. I'm not going to hold that against them. At the end of the day, you got to do what's best for you, and they've got a young driver in the stables that needs a ride right now, and I get that. So on top of that, Jeff Gordon, never look past Jeff Gordon. He's my number 4, and I firmly believe that he still deserves a place in the 2010s. Obviously, he didn't win any championships after 2010, but he still had an appearance. He still won races, and I think simply by being in the conversation, Jeff Gordon deserves to be in the best drivers of the decade. I know a lot of people might disagree with me on that. A lot of people will say he didn't have the win percentage that he had early on in his career, but I don't think that matters. You see plenty of drivers that show up and only get 1 win in 5 years, and we still regard them as some sort of great driver because they had a catalog of top 10s, So on top of that, I think you've got to look at Kevin Harvick, Brad Keselowski, and Matt Kenseth are my next 3, and they come in no order. And realistically, the names that have come before here, no order. I think they've had a tremendous impact on my life. Jimmy Johnson might be the number 1 just for me, but everything after that, you can mix and match. I think any of those drivers can fit 2 through 10. But Kevin Harvick, Brad Keselowski, the 3 of those men, they've kind of led the resurgence in the bad boy attitude to me to a certain extent. Kenseth showed up and wasn't afraid to be the bat when somebody else was willing to be the ball for him. He'd move him out of the way if he needed to, and he had no qualms about doing it, especially towards the end of his career with Joey Logano in 2016, I believe it was. Brad Keselowski, another outstanding driver. He's got. I had a lot of high hopes, and you and I discussed this early on in the playoffs. When I came on to do the playoff primer, the playoff update, and I had a lot of high hopes for Brad Keselowski this playoff season, and they didn't pan out. But I don't think he did a terrible job, and I think that's something you and I can discuss, on air here. But Kevin Harvick as well, I think he had a great year, and I would say my final three are Joey Logano, great driver. I think with him winning last year, he kind of cemented his place of being a worthwhile addition to this list. I think he's got a lot of potential to grow over the next 2 or 3 years. And Martin Truex Jr. This is a man that won a lot of races this season. He's got a lot of potential next season. I mean, he's at Joe Gibbs Racing. Where else do you go from here other than up? He's really going to be something special moving forward, and I think he's going to give Kyle Busch a run for his money, and it's going to be fun to watch. So, and last but not least, Dale Earnhardt Jr. I don't think the sport would be anywhere if it wasn't for him, kind of continuing on after his dad and being a media figure, in the sense that, the man showed up every week, did his job, and he was willing to meet with the media and always went above and beyond if he could to really grow the sport and grow the name of NASCAR. So I think if you're going to leave him out of a top 10 list of the decade is a little bit crazy, in the raw sense that he grew the sport and he made the TV deals what they were, if you want to really call it what it is. At the end of the day, he helped get all that funding that NASCAR was looking to get, and it was built upon the back of his father and the drivers that came before him. But without him and the family name that came with it, I don't know if NASCAR would be as big as it is today.
Fair enough. That's a great list, my friend. I'll tell you what, I can't argue with any of the drivers on that list. They've all made their impression in this decade for NASCAR. I think that's very well thought out, and I just appreciate you going ahead and sharing your thoughts on the top 10 NASCAR drivers of the decade. So I'm hoping, like you said, for another great decade in racing. NASCAR is once again tweaking with a lot of things, starting with the advertising, for instance. It's no longer going to be called the Monster NASCAR series. It's just going to be called plain old NASCAR, with 4 main sponsors now being a part of it. Just kind of throwing something different in there to get more visibility back on the sport like it once had. I believe at the turn of this decade, I think is when a lot of people could say was at or near its heights as far as viewership is concerned. So yeah, they do need to go ahead in this decade, find and maybe recapture that type of spirit once again and become a viable, visible, highly visible sport once again that sought out, outside of those rare moments in time in the season where you can get the casual fan into it. Like we talked, like I said, in the past, you were able to get the casual fan into more races during the course of the season. You don't really have it as much now, so they're going to try and go ahead and do things to reclaim that audience once again.
Yeah, and honestly, and you might feel differently about this, Gerald, but I think the introduction of the Gen 7 car is going to be, it's going to have a tremendous impact on the sport. At the end of the day, this is something that I think a lot of people have been looking forward to, in the sense that everyone's talking about the aerodynamic package each year, for the last 2 or 3 years, about how it's terrible and how it's ruining the racing. So I think a lot of people are looking forward to getting a new body style out there, a new generation of car body out there, moving to more of a standardized chassis so that we don't have the variations that we do now, and get a little more parity in the sport. And I think if that can happen, NASCAR can only grow from here. That being said, we know that the track record isn't great when it comes to listening to the fans and doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's something they have to improve on that too in the next decade as well.
Yeah. Wrapping all that up, I just want to say, I know you're talking about best consumer products of the decade right now, right?
That is correct. That was something that you wanted to throw out, and I'm more than happy to, because that's a great idea for a list for for pop culture in the decade. So that's something I definitely want to talk to you about, especially for someone like me who's heading next month into CES. You know me, I always love consumer products, so I want to hear your thoughts, man, on that.
I mean, Gerald, if you have room on your couch or even in your backyard, I can bring a tent and just come hang out and go to CES with you if that's what it comes down to. But I will say, uh, this is going to be a little bit of a surprising list. I'm going to go ahead and put the Apple Watch Series 3 as my number one consumer product of the decade. I think wearable devices changed extremely as soon as the Series 3 was introduced, and you had the upgraded heart rate monitor. And we've seen since the Series 4 came out and now the Series 5, they've got the EKGs built in. And so it's an even better product. And I actually put the Series 5 on my top 10 list of the decade as well, just simply because of the built-in EKG monitor. I've gone through some heart issues over the last 4 months, and so I think that rings a little more true for me than it does somebody else. But it's both of those products, both of those models of product are great innovations for this decade that have pushed us further, and it's saving lives all the time. I can't tell you how many stories I've read about people that have gone into AFib or having heart issues that they would have never known, but their watch alerts them and they end up going to go get checked out. So for that fact alone, that we're saving human lives, I think the Series 3 and the Series 5 go up to the top of my list right away. If we want to joke about something, though, number 3 and number 4 have they were definitely memes. The swag board, number 3 for me. And that became one of those things that was a joke within our family. My mom bought one for me and for my cousin, and we rode them around for Christmas and did everything. And, after that Christmas, I'm not sure we rode them much more, but I still have mine in my garage. I'm waiting for it to explode into a million pieces, once the battery gives out. And so, but the swag board, I know it wasn't a huge success, but I think as far as consumers go, it hit a very wide-reaching range, and a lot of people were willing to joke about it and make have some fun with it. And then the same thing kind of goes for AirPods. I actually like AirPods. I don't, I get the meme, but at the same time, like, I think they're valuable tools in the sense that they've kind of changed the way that even just my wife uses them for conference calls all day. Whether it's just one in, both in. I think it's totally changed the way we interface with our phones, and it's done it for the better. We've kind of gotten a little more ergodynamic, and I don't know. It's surprising to say, but I think AirPods have kind of made a huge change in the industry, and we're actually seeing that now. A lot of the wireless earphones that we're seeing are cable free, and they've got a charging pack that come with them. So we're seeing the shift in the industry. That speaks volumes. When you can actually impact the industry, oh, that really that if you can move consumers, I'm on board with your product. So. And then the rest from there, it kind of just it's the free for all. You know, talk about the rise and fall of streaming platforms. I know we had early versions of Netflix streaming in 2010, but I mean, we've really perfected this streaming platform this decade. Do you disagree at all, Gerald?
Nope. And I think it's something that, at least in the first half of the next decade, is something that's going to get even larger, a little bit more convoluted, although it can't get much more convoluted, but it will get more convoluted, I can assure you, as far as the number of options that are out there. And it might lead to cable and or broadcast networks either rethinking about how they go ahead and do business down the road, or some cable networks, maybe the smaller ones and smaller outlets out there, folding altogether, because streaming will be the way to go, at least for the foreseeable future.
And then the final two I have on my list, I know I said I had 10, but I actually don't. But the PS4 was a big one for me. And
All right. I'm glad you said that, my friend, because that was on my list. So definitely.
well, and it should be on everyone's list. It's one of the most well sold platforms, and throughout the last decade, I think it is actually the best sold platform across the last decade.
Yeah, it is 102.8. I was just looking up while you were speaking earlier. 102.8 sold. It just passed the original PlayStation, although it doesn't hold water to what the PlayStation 2 did. But it is the biggest selling console of this decade.
The PS4 for me was a game changer. I was still rocking my 360 my first year of law school, and it was that was fine at the time. It was 2012. Who needed a PS4 really? Like right when they came out, and I got mine, and it totally changed the way I looked at video games. And it had a tremendous impact on my life. I know you and I haven't discussed this ever on air, but Destiny was my video game. I loved it. I was diehard. I played probably 4 or 5 hours a day if I could. Most, and not joking, 5 or 6 days a week, I played 4 or 5 hours a day. So it had a tremendous impact on my life. I really enjoyed it, and none of that would have been, or it would have been possible without the PS4. But I really enjoyed it because of the PS4 and the system that I was on. And so I really think that's one of the best products of the decade. And if you really want to break it down, the PS4 actually further enabled my home to be a better streaming home, in the sense of all of a sudden I had better access to HBO Go, Netflix, Hulu, all that stuff. And I know some of that came throughout the last few years, and eventually we got PS View. But the PS4 really became a streaming hub for my entertainment center at some point. It wasn't just for video games; it was for all media, and that really changed the way I digested pop culture. So, and then it's to me, I think that video games unite us, and having a platform like that, it gives us something to be proud of, and really work towards the future of being a joint a joint peoples. I don't want to sound too hopeful here, but it really does. Video games can unite us. I've got friends that I've made overseas that I've never seen in person, but we played video games together every night, and I've got friends from overseas that have traveled to the US just to come hang out with me and do a crawfish boil in Minnesota, because that's what I was doing that weekend. So lastly, I do want to say Uber, and I don't know how this fits on the consumer services list or the consumer products
I
list.
would say so, because it uses an app and things of that nature, that it's consumer based driven.
Absolutely. And so, Uber revolutionized our decade in the sense that all of a sudden we had an app that told us anything could be at our fingertips in a given amount of time, right? It really pushed us to not believe, but to realize the possibilities that lay in front of us when it came to utilizing tech, specifically smartphone tech, and how it integrates into our life. Uber, and eventually Lyft, and everybody else that came with it, and all the offshoots that have come with it, Uber Eats, Grubhub. If you want an on-demand service and there's an app for it, you can thank Uber, I think, at the end of the day. And I might be wrong, but I mean, that's, for me, from a cultural impact, I think Uber set the stage for us here for this decade, as far as apps that were opening up the possibility of same day services, or even same hour or same minutes, or not same minute, but same 10 minutes or services, that kind of thing. So.
Fair enough, my friend. That's a great list. Definitely like what Uber represents. Plus, not only the fact that it's revolutionized the way people think about the way they do rideshare, but also, like you said, it revolutionized the way people became dependent on apps and the uses therein. I mean, for all other things as well. So it's a great thing. Indeed, as far as your list, I cannot say anything better. I mean, like I said, it's a great list. I would add on to it personally is the thing that drives those apps is the smartphone. And the modernization of the smartphone, I think, has to be something also taken into account, because the way smartphones have been developed over the course of the past decade. Yes, at the end of the previous decade, we started seeing a shift in the way people were going ahead and using their phone, and also the phones themselves. But I really think this decade really honed in on how those phones are being utilized and how those phones are constructed. So, I mean, your thoughts on that?
Well, I would just say that, was it the smartphone, or was it the technology upon which the smartphone was built? Was, I think, to me, at the end of the day, 4G LTE was the biggest transition there for the decade. When 4G LTE rolled out in 2010, 2011, whatever it was, we only had a few phones that could take advantage of it at first. But as soon as that first iPhone hit the market, and all of a sudden we had this mass adoption, oh my God, all of us realized the potential of what 4G LTE could be and what it meant to getting service to those that may not have traditionally had service or may have had uh, less than enthusiastic speeds when it came to their service.
Fair enough. No, excellent point indeed. I agree with you on that. And just to see that evolvement over the past 10 years has been truly amazing. See the way we now utilize our phones in a totally new way than we did from the previous decade. And also, on that note, is also the way we perceive, not only viewing, but like you said, with streaming, and the streaming formats, because we can literally see streaming formats on anywhere as far as what we see on our phones, our laptops, PCs, things of that nature. But the TVs that support them has also changed dramatically over the course of the last decade. The last part of the decade, in the 2000s, you did start to see thin TVs. You started to see flatter TVs. They weren't exactly as thin or as flat as they are now, but also the fact that you were using plasma, and there was still a debate going on: is plasma better than the standard flat TVs or whatnot? Now it looks like now there's obviously almost a standard in the way flat TVs are presented. They've become much thinner, much narrower, much more high resolution 4K, the advent of 4K and things of that nature. So the evolvement of smart TVs, have come so far over the course of this decade, where now also as well it's become much more affordable, because at the beginning of this decade it was much more expensive to get a flat TV of any type, and now it's just basically you can get one. This past Black Friday, you could have gotten an under $200 50 to 55-inch television. That would have been not uncommon if you go to your major department stores this past Black Friday. So it's something we're seeing more and more often. They're becoming cheaper and cheaper, but are also becoming much more resourceful in the way they go ahead and present that information, because they have the smart, apps and built in to it, and making it much more of a consumer friendly product. So I think that was probably something I like to have, that I've liked to see, that I enjoyed seeing over the course of this past decade as well. And then finally, I think one of the big consumer products is social media itself. I mean, we're a society now that is totally driven by social media in ways the previous decades could not even possibly imagine.
I can't agree more.
Yeah, with Facebook, Twitter, Facebook at the beginning of the decade, in the middle of the decade, Twitter taking over, Instagram. Now you have TikTok. You have all these different types of social media formats, and people, expressing themselves in one way or the other, positive or negative. I think social media is one of the biggest things to ever hit this decade, or any other for that matter.
Well, and I don't want to get political at all, but I mean, if people have a chance, go look at The Great Hack on Netflix. I mean, if you want to look at the impact of social media on just our lives in the last 5 years, that documentary alone will tell you and all you need to know as far as how Facebook and Twitter and your general social media platforms have impacted the way we've lived our lives. So um, I can't I can't disagree with either of those suggestions. I mean, those are great suggestions. The smartphone alone, I think, is tremendously impacted our lives. Uh, I have trouble now when I'm out in public and I don't have service and I'm talking to somebody and it's like, we have an unresolved question and I need to Google it and it's you don't have service and you don't know what to do, or you're out trying to get something accomplished and you don't know what the proper steps are and you don't have service, so you can't get on YouTube to look up the proper DIY video. I mean, my life revolves around access to um, the higher functions of the internet, I guess is the best way to put it from my perspective. And those aren't even the higher functions of the internet. Those are just basic structures of show me a video and let me just follow along with you. So,
Exactly. I mean, YouTube, you even throw that in there as well, like you said. And yeah, just this whole social media change has affected, in such a strong way, the way we view our world as we know it.
well, I'm looking forward to hearing what the view or the listeners think about their top 10 for the decade. Whether you guys have a poll going on or not, I would really love to hear what other people have to say about it. Just because I know my view is very narrow and biased towards me, but I would love to hear what other people have to say about it. Just because I think we had a lot of great inventions this decade, and it's hard to really appreciate them when things are innovating at such a speed nowadays, such a high speed nowadays.
Exactly, exactly. And you can express that to both Marcus and myself, and we'll read it on the show here. All you got to do is just send in your thoughts on the best of pop culture this decade. What has affected you the most? We want to hear your thoughts. Popculturecosmos at yahoo.com or at popculturecosmos on Twitter. Well,
Gerald,
oh,
I've got three questions for you before we go, if that's
oh no,
okay.
sure, yeah, go ahead.
So, for the decade, what was your best movie or your favorite movie?
My favorite movie of the decade, I'd probably have to say, well, I know I'm probably going to mess up sometime because I've actually got an article on it on Pop Culture Cosmos on my top 25 all time. So I'm going to say off the top of my head, Blade Runner 25, Blade Runner 2020, excuse me, the latest Blade Runner to come out. I want to say that's the latest one this decade. I think that I think was probably my favorite, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, because I think that falls somewhere in the latter half of my top 10, my all time. Just thinking, because I think Blade Runner 2049 is my number one movie of this decade.
My Red Gold Green family, the band that I work with occasionally, will get the joke here, and it's not even a joke because I do feel this way. Interstellar was my movie of the decade. The sheer fact that I went to go see it in IMAX to begin with.
You're a brave man.
Oh man, I loved it. It was. I know a lot of people don't agree with me on that movie, but for some reason that movie really resonated with me. The sound design, the video, the visual, just the visual design of it alone, it really resonated with me. But as we know from this episode and previous episodes, I am a little bit of a sci-fi nerd, a little bit of a space nerd, so of course that was going to resonate with me.
Well, I would say for me, it is number one, Blade Runner 2049. Number two, you were asking for, and that's The Raid Redemption, which is the best martial arts movie I've ever seen. And number three, going back a little bit farther on my list, it would be Skyfall. So that's
really,
yeah, Skyfall is the best James Bond movie ever made. Even though Daniel Craig is not my favorite James Bond, it is the best James Bond movie ever made.
All right, and so my follow-up question to that is, what's your favorite song of the decade? Do you have
your
one?
follow-up questions? Go ahead.
You might not have one. Do you have a favorite song for the decade?
That is a good question. There's so many. If I said Blurred Lines, then I think a lot of people would. I think I would probably have a lawsuit down me. I was just thinking that the other day. I think, but no, I can't say.
You're not wrong.
That was a joke. That was a joke. Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry to the state of Marvin Gaye. Please don't sue me. Yes. That's a tough one. I'd have to think about that one. I have to think. I'd have three. I have 4 or 5 dangling in my head. I'd have to think about. So
yeah,
well, go for it for you, my friend.
Well, no, I would just say, I've had a lot of good times with Post Malone this decade, and obviously he came to prominence from 2016 on or 2015 on, whatever it was. But just listening to him has been outstanding. I got to go see him while he had a number one song on the Billboard charts before he really, really, really blew up. I mean, he'd been big, but he was playing Stubbs in Austin. He could have been playing the amphitheater, like the F1 amphitheater or whatever it was at the time, and I don't know. That was just a great weekend. And he's just a great artist. He's definitely my artist of the decade, with everybody getting their Spotify list this week and, their top 10 of 20 or their top 5 of 2019 or their top 10 of the decade. That's a question that's been on my mind all week is, who are your favorite artists of the decade or who's your favorite artist of 2019? So I wanted to make sure I asked you just to see if you had a question, had an answer to the question. But if I had to rank 2019, Billie Eilish might be up there. I know that might surprise some people, but I mean, I can't stop listening to that album.
Okay, well, yeah, Billie Eilish was a tremendous artist. I mean, she's getting a lot of credit. She's doing a lot of great things. As long as she doesn't pair herself up with Justin Bieber again, she's going to do okay.
Absolutely. I did not enjoy that pairing. So, and then Lastly, do you have a favorite book of the decade?
Blood, Sweat, and Pixels for me.
Okay.
That's probably
Um,
it was an excellent read. It's from the one of the top Kotaku writer from an excellent Jason Shearer. So yeah, people want to go ahead and read an insight of how video games are made and constructed, and the crunch and things of that nature, and how hard it is to go ahead and put out some of the favorite video games and some of the major, from one or another, successful or not successful stories of video games this past decade. I would go ahead and check out Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. It's definitely a great book.
well, I think the expand or not the expanse, but the pop culture cosmos listeners out there know that my favorite book is going to be the Expanse. But
What a shock! What a shock!
what a shock! What a shock! You know that it actually had a tremendous impact on my life, and it reinvigorated my passion for science, and I think it really it provided something that I was missing in my life. So I'm very happy to have found the Expanse this decade.
Well, fair enough. That's some great thoughts right there for you, my friend. I cannot thank you enough for sharing with us on the show. Any last thoughts before we head on out?
No, not at all. But I just want to say happy 2020 to you and the Pop Culture Cosmos family. And I look forward to coming back and talking about Daytona before Daytona happens in February and whatever else that comes up between now and then. If we need to do a postmortem on season 4 of The Expanse, I'd love to come back and do that with you guys.
Thinking we might have to do that because I want to hear your thoughts as The Expanse hits Amazon coming up very soon. Plus, like you said, just before Daytona, definitely want to get you on talking Daytona
And we still need to talk Drone Racing League as well. Don't
exactly,
forget about that.
exactly. We did get a chance. You sent us some great stuff over, not too long ago, and Josh and I have had a chance to take a look at it. So I know we will have some questions for you on the DRL coming up in the new year as well.
Absolutely. I'm building drones nonstop, and I can't wait to share it with you guys.
All right. Well, it's I can't wait to see it either, and I'm just so happy that you're part of what's going on here with the Pop Culture Cosmos now and going forward into a new decade in pop culture. And Marcus, I cannot thank you enough, as always, for what you've done for us in the past and what you're going to do for us going forward right here on the Pop Culture Cosmos.